Hi, everyone. This is Dustin Hausner. I'm the Jewish Outreach and Program Director at the Wayne YMCA. Welcome to Jewish Culture and Jewish Awareness. All our Jewish programming is funded through the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. So today, I'm actually very fortunate that I'm talking to people that I know. They're very lovely people. They're very nice people. And they're actually people who I've known for many years. And I thought they would be the perfect people to talk about the subject we're going to be talking about today, which is interfaith marriage, relationships, and family. So I would like to introduce everyone to Greg and Christine Gritmon. It's very
Hi.
So before we dive into it, I want to kind of give an opportunity for each of you to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about what you do.
Hi, I'm Greg Gritmon. I am Jewish. My family's Reformed Jewish, so we've never been super religious in terms of like weekly services or things like that, but certainly Jewish culture has always been a part of my life growing up. And my father was my parents were interfaith as well. So my mom was Jewish, my father was Christian. But I had a bar mitzvah. I was, raised Jewish, went to temple. So Jewish culture was always a part of growing up, but I also had some exposure to Christianity.
And hi, I'm Christine Gritmon, and Christine's not a very Jewish name, so I'm the not Jewish one. I was raised Catholic. I was pretty religious at various points in my life. My parents are pretty religious, but yeah. I have embraced the Judaism in our family as well, which we'll discuss.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you both making time to come on, and obviously, I hope the interview goes well, and you'll still invite me to fun engagements after the interview. So
when we're allowed to.
There we go. When we're allowed to, yes, we have to be safe for COVID. So I'll ask kind of the obvious question, which is, how did you two meet?
Match.com. I like to say I ordered my husband online. The one interesting fact about that is that he
lied. Well, not lied. I on the profile
there was an omission.
We were a perfect match on Match.com on all the bullets. That is one of the reasons is because I had put under religion, spiritual but not religious. Mm-hmm. When in fact, like I said, I was raised Jewish. And I think that's probably closer to the way I am spiritually.
Mm-hmm. It's closer to how you live.
It's closer to how I live. So I felt that was accurate. Had I put Jewish, we wouldn't have had the perfect dots, and the person trying to order me online.
You probably would have still come up on search, but it wouldn't have been like the perfect record. And for the record, I had no problem with actually dating Jewish people in real life. I just figured if I'm literally ordering my husband online, I might as well put like the ideal, which would I also felt like a lot of times Jewish people want to marry other Jewish people. That's a frequent thing. So I figured, you know what, I'm not going to put on Match that I want to meet a Jewish guy and then have him be like only interested in dating and not interested in marrying me. I was ready for my husband. So it turned out not to matter, of course, but yeah, I'm kind of grateful that you made that little omission there so that you did come up like top in the search.
So Greg, let me ask you, because obviously I think the question would be a little different if, let's say, Christine had put her profile on JDate, which is a very known Jewish dating service. Right. Match.com is known usually for more of a Christian dating service. I'm curious, was it just one of many websites that you had entered in on? Was there a particular reason? Were you looking for someone non-Jewish, or what was your...
I don't feel like Match is non-Jewish. It is Christian. I feel like eHarmony is the one that's Christian.
Okay.
But, well, no, I think what he's saying in general is there a reason I... wasn't specifically narrowing my search to Judaism. And I think, again, that comes down to sort of my spirituality, which is that I didn't really, religion hasn't played a huge part in my life.
You've never dated a Jewish girl.
I've never dated a Jewish girl.
Okay.
But again, it is not by choice. It's just, I mean, to be fair, my pool of people I've dated is 2.
Yeah.
So.
And I had dated Jewish guys. Like, I didn't care.
But yeah, so again, it was more of an idea of religion wasn't really something I was searching for in any capacity, either Jewish or non-Jewish. So that's really why I don't remember. I believe I did have a profile on, was it JDate at the time? There might have been another one. Yeah.
You were on
I might have had a profile on there.
I think Plenty of Fish or OkCupid, one of those.
Yeah, I don't remember the full list. Only one of them mattered.
Yes.
But yeah, so it was more about the religion not playing a part in my search.
And I specifically didn't go on eHarmony because I felt like eHarmony had a bit of a Christian overtone to it. I almost went for eHarmony because I felt like people who go on eHarmony are looking for marriage, not like a hookup. But I ultimately declined because I was like, well, it's a little Christian, and I don't really define, much like Greg, it's not really necessarily part of what I was looking for in a mate.
So let me ask, because obviously it's one thing to be dating someone of a different, ethnicity, religion, background, so forth. But then when you get to the point of, getting engaged or getting to that close point, then that becomes more of a conversation for many people. So I'm curious, before you got engaged or when you were at that point, was there a real conversation about what it would be like to be in an interfaith, marriage and family, or was that something that kind of was later on a discussion?
Right. Well, that was actually definitely a discussion when we were deciding to get married, and we knew we both wanted kids, so that wasn't a problem. But what sort of religion they would be raised, what sort of culture they would be raised in, I think was a big conversation because, as Christine said, she was raised Catholic, and she certainly identified with the Catholicism.
Religion was a much bigger part of my family life growing up than it was for Greg. We went to mass every single week. My parents always will. And to me, again, it was this idea where I identified with the Judaism enough to not want my kids just raised Catholic. And so there was a discussion about like just how would we raise our kids? How would we live our lives? How would our family, what kind of a wedding would we have? Would it be in a church? Things like that. So, and God bless you, Christine does all of the real legwork on any of these things, accommodating these things, but God bless her, she found solutions to, I wouldn't say problems, but solutions to the challenges. But again, those solutions wind up being like not getting married in a church. So, I think that you probably gave a little bit more than I did in that compromise. And honestly, it felt less like a compromise to me. Part of it honestly is I wanted to be sure that my mother felt good. We had a couple things. So first of all, we found a Catholic priest and a Jewish rabbi who worked together, and they had their whole shtick down. They had their whole ceremony script that had been approved by the bishop and all that. And the interesting thing about that is that we got married in the New York metro area, of course, since that's where we're both always from. And if we had gotten married in the Archdiocese of New York City, we would not have had the level of options that we wound up having, because we found a priest who was in the Diocese of Rockville Center in Long Island, where we got married. We got married in Oakdale, Long Island. And thankfully, that's a different bishop. So our priest was able to get a slight tweak to the script approved by his bishop that I'm sure the cardinal would not have approved, which was in the Catholic marriage ceremony, you're supposed to promise to raise your kids Catholic, basically. He had it worded to promise to share our faith.
Wow,
and that felt good. A lot of people wouldn't have given a second thought to that. They would have just been like, oh, sure, we'll promise to raise kids Catholic and just not keep that promise. But we wanted to keep all of our marital
that's another
promises.
thing, which was that we didn't want to go through the promises of our vows, like willy-nilly, like, well, yeah, because that's what you say at your wedding.
Yeah.
We wanted to, if we were promising to raise our kids a certain way, like I definitely can promise to share our faith and to share, Jewish culture and the story of the struggles and the hardships that the Jewish people have gone through,
and even little things like making sure our kids don't like know about Christmas but not know about Hanukkah, like we make sure they know all the real stuff of
but the real meaning behind them. Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I was growing up, one of the things that was really explained to me is the real simplified version of it is just like, it's a big old story, and Judaism is chapter 1 and Catholic Christianity is chapter 2, so not that you necessarily, obviously if you're Jewish, you don't necessarily think that was chapter 2, but I thought it was a nice way of simplifying it to a way that,
people don't always count sequels as canon.
Yeah. And that's definitely not been a problem for us since having the children. The idea of like sharing our faith and raising them and really making sure that they understand the meaning behind everything that we're doing, the spirituality.
God is disagreeing here. Do you hear this?
Yes. Sorry, you're getting the fire alarm.
No. In my head, I'm still laughing about the sequel.
Canon.
But we also get the joke. So.
But like another thing is, in Catholicism, you're supposed to do a premarital counseling thing called pre-Cana.
Okay.
And we were very blessed that our priest and rabbi duo already had a group pre-Cana that was interfaith. So we went and spent, I think like a whole Saturday or something, with a handful of other couples who were also Catholic Jewish matches, which was perfect. And of course, the question of what to do with the kids came up. A lot of people had chosen one or the other. A lot of people had just gone with whichever partner cared more, or more accurately, whichever partner's family cared more. So if that had been us, we would have been like, all right, Catholic. But or some people said, nothing, because that's always the thing where people say, well, if you're raising them both, you're raising them nothing. And I have to say we've been slacking, but we had a plan we need to get back on track with.
Well, now we're getting to the age with our son where it's now religious education needs to start becoming a consideration again.
And I found that too before they were even born. I found an interfaith group. We've been to a few celebrations. We haven't enrolled them in the religious education classes every week. Maybe next year, we'll see. But we have gone to some celebrations where it's been all interfaith families. And so, this one is focused on Passover and this one is focused on Easter, but everyone there is celebrating both. Just not at the same celebration, which I also think is good. I think that it's good that they separate those out. They don't have a Christmas/Hanukkah. No. I like that they have a nice program there.
And it's worth mentioning as well, when we had our son, of course, this was where you have to make those immediate decisions.
My mother was most concerned about that. Honestly, my mother said, well, of course your children have to be baptized. Like, she was legitimately very concerned that my children would not be baptized. First, she was concerned that my marriage wouldn't be validly Catholic. We have a whole story with that. But long story short, it is validly Catholic and it is validly Jewish. We had a priest, we had a rabbi, we have everything signed, and But yeah, for the kids, she was like, well, you can't not baptize your children. And
we wound up having a christening.
We did both. So for our son, we actually found a female mohel, a mohelette. And from what I understand, there are certain Jews who would not consider this particular mohel valid, but she was Reform and she was all good with Reform, which is all that mattered to us. So she's actually also a midwife. She delivered my friend and she delivered my friend's children. So we did the business end of the bris in her office. We did it on the what is it, the 9th day? Whatever day you're supposed to. We brought Josh to her office. Our kids both have nice Old Testament names. So Joshua, we brought him to her office and we did the prayers. So we basically said all the prayers in this medical office while she did it. And then she came, we had a whole ceremony later than that, not much later, where she came, the mohelette came, and she gave him his Hebrew name, and we did the prayers all over again. So basically people just didn't have to witness the cutting part, but we all prayed over him, and she gave him his Hebrew name, Yeshua Malachi. And then we went, she also had a priest. This was another wonderful duo, a totally different duo, the Catholic priest who baptized him there. And we did for Ellie. Ellie obviously didn't have a bris, but Ellie, we had the mohelette just because she had come to the previous one, and why not? We had her give the Hebrew name.
Yep.
Yeah. Elisha ben Miriam.
Yep. Oh, were you expecting me to remember it?
You don't even know your own Hebrew name.
So let me step back for a little bit, because I definitely do want to get into like the holidays and the family part of it. But I'm curious because you mentioned, obviously, you got married, so clearly both your families were engaged with it. Greg, you're in an interesting position where your parents were actually already in interfaith married, so it wasn't like, Jewish family and then this would be the first. But I'm curious, for both sets of your family, was there animosity? Was there concerns? Was it pretty, okay, you both love each other, God bless you, like what?
Not on my end.
There was no animosity on my end. There were concerns because my family is not intermarried. We pretty much everyone married Catholic. A few people married Protestants, but not very many. So that was interesting. My mom just really wanted to make sure that I'd have a valid marriage in the church, which doesn't mean a building. It means the establishment of the church. So we got that. And she wanted to make sure my kids would be baptized. And I wanted to make sure my kids would be baptized, but in a way where I wouldn't have to lie. I didn't want to check a box. just like in our wedding. So I'm really grateful that we found ways of doing both of those things. And yeah, it wasn't animosity. My mom loved Greg. My mom was very happy that I was marrying Greg. I just think she would have been happier if Greg had been like, okay, and we'll be Catholic.
We'll be Catholic.
But, you know, I mean, we got married 12 years ago. I mean, we're all good.
And Greg, your side of the family, if I may ask?
My side of the family. Well, no, there was no problems.
Everyone's intermarried on Greg's side. There's a lot of intermarriage on Greg's side.
There's actually, it's interesting. A lot of one of my sisters converted to Christianity. Catholicism for her husband. See, I'm not so plugged into these. And my other sister did stay Jewish, and she married a Jewish man. So their kids are Jewish. But then a lot of my extended cousins, like a lot of them wound up converting out of Judaism, except for one, which their whole family was Jewish, and so their whole line is
more than
Jewish.
One.
Well, Dina and that whole
several of your cousins married Jewish, but regardless, we all share that family connection though. Like the Katz extended family with grandma, the matriarch, very very connected. Hanukkah is the biggest family gathering of the year by far, and even the branches of the family that are like fully Catholic or whatever, they still come and they celebrate Hanukkah.
Right.
With the family. I'm not sure everyone does stuff with Passover, but anyway.
No, not since grandma passed.
Yeah.
So when you both got married and kind of before the kids came, because I think this question kind of comes up, did you both go to each other's houses of worship when you wanted to? Like, did you split off individually and practice in your own way? Or was it something that kind of became a combined thing as a couple?
Neither of us had regularly been going to houses of worship. Greg, as he said before, didn't even grow up going to houses of worship much. How many times had you really gone to temple?
Oh, no, only for my religious education did I really go to temple.
Yeah, when you're studying for your bar mitzvah, that's pretty much it.
But so we did celebrate at the holidays, like there were prayers. And
but did you go?
I spoke the Hebrew.
But did you go to temple for the high holidays?
No.
So it wasn't really. And I used to be a regular churchgoer. I had stopped being a regular churchgoer a little while before we met. So that wasn't a big deal. We have gone to church for Christmas.
And Easter.
We've gone to church for Christmas and Easter. I want to get back into that. But I wanted to go to temple for high holidays.
I know. But again, I hadn't grown up doing that, so that wasn't important to me.
And one thing that's interesting now is that, again, my family's Catholic, Greg's family tradition is Reform Judaism, and yet the two faith communities, like right near where we live right now, that we feel the most connected to are different denominations. We live directly across the street from an Episcopal church, and it's not like, you can't really swap and change out. Episcopalianism is different from Catholicism, so it is a different denomination. But I feel more connected to that one than I do to the Catholic Church around the block. And similarly, the only synagogue we've been to family events at, we haven't been to services, but to family events at, is a conservative synagogue. Congregation Sons of Israel. So because they have a very great family environment. They really reach out to young families a lot, and they're very cool with interfaith families, as is Grace Episcopal Church. So we haven't joined either faith community, and it does feel weird if we're going to get involved in faith community to not go with a Catholic church and a Reformed synagogue. So we'll see.
I was going to say, I think you just announced, so any rabbis or any in the area, but I am curious because you, obviously you talked about your kids a little bit and that you were able to do joint services and things with them. When suddenly you started to have children, was there a feeling of a need to want to be more religious or to do more religious things with them? Because, just as a parent myself, I find that I'm learning a lot more about my religion than I had previously because I want to teach. So was there that feeling with you, or was it something where it's like, let's kind of just see how things go along? What was both your thoughts?
Go ahead.
It's been interesting. I mean, part of it going in, I was like, I don't want the Jewish stuff to get lost in the sauce, because we're in a, dominant Christian society, so I wanted to make sure that they also celebrated the Jewish holidays and didn't consider them secondary. And that definitely has been accomplished. They're pretty
Yes.
into the Jewish holidays. But then another thing I hadn't anticipated
Mhm.
is I knew the stories of Christianity like so intimately because they were, of course, a huge part of things. You know, I know the whole Easter story back and forth. I know the whole Christmas story back and forth. I know the stuff from the Bible because it was part of my upbringing. And my kids, it's less of a thing for them. We do tell them those stories at the holidays and they kind of forget. You know,
I
like,
think part of it is also, like we said, like when we got married, we didn't want to just go through the motions and say, this is what happened, like this is what we'll do. We want to mean what we say, and that goes for our kids as well. And when it comes to religion, you know, a lot more of that is based on faith and belief. And it's really hard to say to our kids definitively one
this
way or
is what
another,
happened.
this is what happened.
Yeah.
This is who
Because we're
Jesus
not
was. This is who
sure.
Moses was. Yeah.
We're having our own spiritual journeys.
Right. So, you know, we've definitely focused a lot when we cover these things. We talk about the meanings of those holidays and the meanings of this stuff, but with a little less of the concrete, this is how it was, and a little bit more of this is how, you know, this is what may have been. Certainly many people believe that this is what has happened.
This is the story, but we make sure that they know that it's not just a story to everyone.
Yeah, like this is something they can choose to believe as well. Like this very much may have happened. And if they're interested in learning more, we are happy. We want to encourage their own religious exploration if that's something that they have or express interest in. But we don't feel at least I don't personally feel a need to give that to them or encourage them to want to explore those things further.
I care less about their full faith in the stories as accurate. But one thing that I feel like I would like to get stronger on is I would like to get stronger on their concept of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like they don't have that framework. And I feel like they're old enough at this point where I would like them to have more of that framework. So I would like to teach them more about God and about spirituality. In terms of the specific faith traditions and the stories in the Old Testament and the New Testament, I feel like that's more a matter of cultural literacy for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want them to get those as well, but I want it more so that like they know. I care less about their faith in that. But I am a little worried that I'm worried that I haven't done enough to encourage a relationship with God, because that's something that I had, and I don't know if you had that in the same way.
I didn't have that.
But
And
I
in
feel
fact, my Christian father expressed a concern over that, about the fact that I didn't necessarily know whether I believed in a God, and I don't necessarily know for certain that there isn't a God.
Josh told me he doesn't, and I feel like I don't know.
Well, and I've always taken the approach of, you know, God and faith comes from a place of we don't know these things for certain, and this is something where you have to go at it with faith, and that's the whole point of faith, is this belief in something higher, something bigger. For me, it has always been the spiritual but not religious element is I don't feel a need to define it to be able to appreciate it and to be able to be thankful for it. And because I haven't felt a need to define it for myself, I haven't felt the need to define it for my children.
I just feel like I feel like I won't care if at 25 Josh says I don't believe in God. I care that he says it at 8.
Mm-hmm.
I would really like I'd like to open that door a little more towards the spiritual side, because I think we both believe in something.
Mm-hmm.
Again, less defined, but I think we both believe in the spiritual side of life existing. And so the fact that our kids haven't really gotten a basis in that, I'm starting to feel more and more that we're a little behind on that. And I would like to embrace that a little bit more.
So let me ask in regards to, because it sounds like, you know, you both are pretty open to exploration of different things, you know, whatever's meaningful and important to you in your family and your kids' lives. And obviously your family each has had their own approaches when it comes to your marriage, of things they care about with the kids, you know, what ceremonies they do, things like that. From an outside perspective, have you gotten much either encouragement or pushback in being an interfaith couple? Because, you know, then, for example, you know, in Judaism, some feel that it has to be a child of, you know, a Jewish mother. You know, in Catholicism, certainly, you know, there's very strict guidelines in certain ways of marrying someone who has those values. So I'm curious, has there been either positive, negative, or it's been pretty cool and, you know, good along the way?
I've certainly felt less pressure from other people. I don't feel like we're being judged by many people. The most I've felt is, I think, like you mentioned from your parents, the concern of making sure that that these children are sort of recognized under God and under the church, so that, their souls are safe. But you
To
can
be
go
clear,
more than
my
that.
parents don't believe you're like going to hell or anything.
No, I understand that.
Because that's another thing. I'm grateful that I'm not raised like some sort of fundamentalist Christian. My parents are very much thinking Catholics. They're people of strong faith and also of strong scientific mind. But yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the fact that we've spent our lives in the New York metro area has been a huge asset, because I've long described Rockland County as everyone's either Irish Catholic or Jewish. Our family is all of the above. So I feel like it's not that unusual around here. I think that if we were in a different area of the country or in another country, it would be a lot harder. One interesting hiccup we did encounter, and this goes back to the wedding story, is, of course, in the Catholic Church, you are not allowed to divorce, which means that if you're married, you're married unless they're dead. And Greg actually had been married briefly before. So that was the one hiccup. Which was, oh no, there was another hiccup with the Jewish thing too. I don't remember it though. But with the Catholic thing, we knew that would be a hiccup. And we really lucked out with a loophole. So the way it works with Catholicism is, if you're not Catholic and you get married not in the Catholic Church, it's valid. Because they're like, you know what? I mean, you got married in your own tradition. It's a valid marriage. Mm-hmm. If you're Catholic and if you're a baptized Catholic and you got married outside the church, it doesn't count. They're like, that's not a valid marriage because you're Catholic, so you have to have a Catholic marriage. If you're not Catholic, whatever. So at first we were like, well, Greg's first marriage is totally going to count because it was not a Catholic marriage. So they'll be like, yes, that's valid. But as it turned out, and he didn't even know this until we looked into it, she was baptized Catholic.
Wow.
And they did not have a Catholic marriage. So we had to go on this whole they're not in touch at all, like very actively not in touch. So we had to go on this whole goose chase to try to track down to try to track down her baptismal certificate.
Wow.
So that an annulment could be granted. They didn't need the annulment for themselves. That didn't matter. So the church could formally say this marriage didn't count. Greg is free to marry in the Catholic Church. And he did wind up having to reach out to her, which sucked, but we got the baptismal certificate, we got the certificate of annulment, and we were able to have our marriage. But that was more bureaucracy than anything else.
So let me ask you both, because, this is a topic that for some people is long past. Love is love, marry whoever you want. For other people, it's you stick with the faith. If you don't do that, then all these terrible
traditions die,
traditions die. And again, I could use a much harsher language, but you get where I'm going. So, but I'm curious for you. Do you believe there are certain misconceptions about interfaith marriage as to how hard it is or how easy it is, or is there anything that for anyone who just isn't familiar with an actual couple who's interfaith marriage just because of where they are, where they're from, are there things about it that you would want people to know about?
We believe there's literally one main difference, which is, do you believe this guy was divine? Like, we believe there's so much it sounds so dismissive, but we believe there's so much commonality. There is so much commonality. The values are so highly consistent because, of course, Christian values came from Jewish values. There are more differences than that. We know that. We know there are more differences than that. But when it comes down to it, we just feel it's so similar that it just hasn't been an issue. And we also each have our own sort of things that we believe our beliefs don't subscribe entirely to either fully.
Right. I think that there's multiple levels when it comes to religion. There's your belief structure in God and the definition of God. There's your beliefs in how you should conduct your life and what sort of person you should be.
Values.
And the values and the people you should be is very much, there's a lot of overlap between Judaism, the Christianity, and the Catholicism.
There's pretty much full overlap between you and I as individuals.
With you and I as individuals, there's complete overlap. However, there is also, for more religious couples, I think that there's, to some people, you go to church every single Sunday, and that's something you have to do. And I'm certain that in the more Orthodox or conservative Jewish community, it's the same thing. So I could see in a relationship where both of the members of the relationship are more practicing than we are, that there could be some conflict there, and that idea of like your child has to be one or the other, I could see that being the main conflict. So when it comes to who you are as an individual, religion is a very, very specific to you thing. When you get into a couple, there's the question as to whether your beliefs and their beliefs and your lifestyles can coexist. And then I think where the difficulty probably lies is when you have to make a decision for people that you are handing it down to, and what do you hand down, and what are they by definition and by belief. And I think that's where probably the most tension could be, the most potential for disagreement and tension.
The understanding of duties, as you said, like, is it your duty to go to mass? Is it your duty to perform certain Jewish rituals? Are you, slacking on your duty by not participating in these cultural things? And you can participate in both sets of cultural things. I don't feel like they actually negate each other, but we had actually not been participating in a lot of those rituals and things. We've actually brought more of them in since getting together. I feel like we've done more recognition, more cultural recognition of certain things of each faith since getting together, and especially since having children. Where, again, we did discuss that it was important for both of us that they be exposed to both, that they understand the meaning of everything. And I feel like they could have a greater understanding of meaning, as we said. I think that we'll get back on that, because I don't like the idea of if they're both, they're nothing. Because we've had a lot of discussions about the points of potential conflict between the two faiths and between what they preach and between the dogma. And we actually came out at the same place on all of them. So we've come to a place where we feel like there doesn't have to be conflict. It's all about, do you believe in absolutes? Yeah. One of the things that's been coming up recently. So I absolutely love you. Yes. I believe in that. One of the interesting things that's been coming up more is we're starting to have the children of cousins. There's now a lot of bar and bat mitzvahs starting to come. There's a lot of, those first communions and things. And these are very big, momentous occasions. And we're trying to explain to our children why it's an important event in these kids' religious upbringings. And then we're not giving our kids those specific religious upbringings, trainings rather. The interfaith teachings. Group that we keep not signing up for has their own versions of things at those times, at those milestones. So that's what I think the discussion that's going to be needing to happen sooner than later is this idea of, do we start formally having that education, or is that something we sort of educate at home and they don't have those specific ceremonies? I like that the interfaith group does a big project when they're about 13, when you would do either a bar bat mitzvah or confirmation, where they have to research religion. So it is religious, but they also do a community service project. So I like that. So it's not a matter of them committing formally to this faith or that faith. It's a matter of them living their faith. And I think that that's really nice. Yeah. It's a matter of them exploring and living their values more than committing to a specific set of dogma. Right.
So, well, first of all, it sounds like you were very fortunate that you were able to find interfaith connections in different places, whether it was
New York metro area.
Or things like that were able to be so supportive of you. So since it was brought up, I won't, because you're still figuring out kind of the spiritual and religious, teachings and things for the kids, but for something like Christmas and Hanukkah, which are obviously coming up very soon, do you have time? Do you celebrate both? And I would ask, in what way? Because obviously, do you celebrate Christmas kind of as Christmas, or do you go into the religious connotations of Christmas and then the religious connotations of Judaism? Because obviously that's an area where it could get very interesting. So I'm curious how you both have navigated through that.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, as you know, like the celebration of Hanukkah isn't in contrast to the celebration of Christmas. I think they're telling two very different, they're celebrating two very different events. And I think it's funny because, contemporary culture feels like Hanukkah is comparable, and it's, not meant to be as comparable to Christmas. It just happens at the same time. So we do give the full story of Hanukkah and what it means and what happens. And then Christmas is obviously a much more important holiday for the Catholic side of that. And we also give that explanation. And like you said, there's probably some room to try and explore the higher
But
level
they know
meanings.
they know the whole birth of Christ story, though Ellie keeps forgetting it, man.
Well,
and same with the
she's
Maccabees.
6.
They forget about the Maccabees too. You know what? They kind of forget both. But we do teach both. We do make sure to read stories about both, the religious side of both. We're not just all like Santa and latkes. but at the same time, we really do up the Santa and the latkes. They have a lot of fun. The kids actually, because Christmas, the holiday season goes on for so long, Christmas itself is kind of like, yay. But Hanukkah, they really get into the 8 days of Hanukkah. Like, they're all about Hanukkah on those days. Sometimes it overlaps with Christmas, and then we make sure to do both. But they love lighting the Hanukkah candles. They're starting to learn the prayers, which I think is cool. The prayers that you say over the candles. They love dancing to the songs. They love dreidels. They love like all the secular celebration stuff that's been built up around both holidays, but they actually like Hanukkah a little better.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
Well, we have the added fun also that her birthday is 2 days before Christmas.
Yes, it is.
So like
that's
December
the most important holiday.
December in general is just like all celebration all the time.
But I was talking to Ellie yesterday in the car about how even though because we passed a nativity scene, because people are decorating early this year, because 2020. We passed a nativity scene, and I had to explain to her again, because she like forgot. I explained to her again about the birth of Jesus and stuff. But I said, but it wasn't his actual birthday. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, he wasn't actually born on what is now December 25th. That's just when we celebrate it. She's like, oh, okay. I'm like, but I was actually born on December 23rd. So,
That's again where you come into the trickiness of like, how literally do we take these celebrations? Because
I think it's important to let them know, though, that they understand that for some people they are very literal.
Yes, exactly.
Like I need to raise them with a respect for true believers.
Yeah, the respect part is something that's been very important to both of us. The idea that they understand that to some people, this holiday isn't about getting presents and some traditional things that you do, games that you play and movies you watch. Like, this is a really important holiday for people.
We should do up Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur a little bit more. We really should actually talk to them a little bit more about that, not just being days off from school.
Yeah, well, what we what we did a little bit was, we did this a while back, was the idea of a lot of Jewish celebration to me has been about like, you get a bunch of people together to celebrate. And I think that's something that has suffered because, so my grandmother was sort of the matriarch of like all of my aunts and uncles and then all of my cousins. And so we got together yearly on all of these days. And then as my aunt started to be like a little too old to be doing like hosting this whole crazy party every single year.
And now they've downsized their house. There isn't even a house that can
fit everyone. There's not a house that could fit everyone. Now it's sort of come to the more of the cousins to start having their own individual celebrations. And as we mentioned, a lot of those are more interfaith marriages. Some of them aren't Jewish at all anymore.
And it's gotten very segmented. The fact that Greg's father wasn't Jewish anyway and didn't have extended family. His mother is not in New York, and his sisters each have their own families to celebrate with, including they have a different father than Greg does, who is Jewish. So they also have his family. So we kind of don't have a Jewish family to celebrate with. We did our own interfaith, not terribly religious Passover Seder a few years ago. I wore my shirt that says Shiksa while I was pouring the Manischewitz. It was great, and we keep meaning to do that again. We had some friends who had no connection to Judaism who came because they were curious, and they had never heard the Haggadah, and they didn't know all these things, and they didn't know about the plagues.
Puppets.
So I think
got the Haggadah plate. We just got to celebrate.
I think we need to do that again, even if it's on Zoom or something. We got to bring back the interfaith Seder.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And educate.
One resource I'll just say is PJ Library has some really good stuff on.
Yes, they do. PJ Library is such a good resource.
Yeah, we interviewed them a while ago. So, and for anyone who hasn't watched it, PJ Library, we did an interview with them. It's really good. Just to kind of wrap up a little bit, obviously, you can't predict what the future is going to hold, except that COVID-19 will go away eventually. Thank goodness. But let me ask, and again, it's a little premature, but is there any hope or expectation where where your children will want to go on their journey? Are you hoping that they'll identify as both, one over the other? Okay, obviously them marrying whomever they wish. Is there any sort of expectations or hope, or is it fairly fluid at this time? Because they are fairly young. I'm not going to say the ages, but they are fairly young.
I think we differ.
Yeah, I know my hope is that they have some belief. I don't want that, similar to what we did with our marriage and our sort of the whole way we've been living our relationship. I don't want them to do things just to do things. I don't want them to, I'm going to convert to Catholicism because that's what my spouse is and they care more than I do. Like that feels hollow to me, which isn't to say that other people who have done it, it's hollow for them. I'm sure it's deeply meaningful when you actually do it.
Some of the most religious Jews I know are converts.
Oh yes. But yeah, it's like if they're going to do a conversion, if they're going to choose a belief and choose a path, I want them to really believe it, and I want it to be meaningful for them, and not just sort of an act of going through the motions. So that's my, I hope that they do find their definition of or some path that they identify with. And I think that that's what we've done with the education a little, to some degree. We've sort of exposed them to all these things to say there's different ways of believing out there, and find the one that works for you. And I think you're probably right that there's ways we can sort of be a little bit more encouraging of the higher up spirituality of that, and finding what they believe from a higher purpose.
I would also personally like for them to feel a deeper sense of belonging to both, because I feel like they don't feel like they belong to either right now. And I know some people, I have some friends, adults now, of course, who were raised both and actually do feel connections to both communities. And then, of course, we all know people who were raised both and feel neither. They feel like nothing. So I would really like to lean more towards that feeling both. Like there's one family in particular I can think of where I'm friends with these two sisters. And one of them married a Catholic and she's raising her kids Catholic. One of them married someone Jewish and they're raising their kids Jewish. But the fact is they both feel at home in both places. Like the one who's raising her family Jewish feels comfortable going to church on Christmas. She feels like it's a place she belongs and she's not visiting someone else's faith community. And same with the one who's Catholic. When she goes to a temple, she doesn't feel like she doesn't belong. And I feel like our kids would very much feel like they didn't belong in both of those places right now. So that is something I would like to get on top of fixing. I want them to feel more belonging in both places culturally. I want them to feel culturally like they belong in both of these spaces. And then spiritually, I would like them to, again, just not have nothing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a huge part of life that I've benefited from. And it can change. It can be an ever evolving journey with your relationship to it. But to not have a spiritual life, it kind of makes me sad.
Well, I think on that note, I want to thank you, Greg and Christine Gritmon, for obviously taking the time to talk about your relationship, your different identities, and speaking with us today. For everyone out there, I want to wish you to stay healthy, stay safe. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, however you choose to celebrate. And if you don't celebrate anything, that's okay too, as long as you're.
That's for the rest of us.
Exactly right.
Happy my birthday, everybody.
Happy Christine's birthday. So thank you all so much for joining us. Have a wonderful day today.
Bye.